some really interesting experiences with digital detox. As a person who is intensely addicted to devices, if I could get an updated Google Watch, I would. And I always check my iPhone 100 million times a day. And before I go to bed, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I have insomnia, the first thing I do is check my iPhone. And it's not a very good way to live. I mean, you feel stressed much more than you would, or than you did when you think back before you had iPhones. You're constantly on call. That's your own initiation, really. I mean, you don't have to check it, but you get into this kind of a sense of anxiety where if you don't check it, you're missing something. And that if you don't check it now and clear your emails, you mightn't be able to catch up the next day. So there's a sense that every moment that you have idle, whether it's insomnia or waiting at the bus stop, you should try to use that in a productive way and engage in some sort of digital exchange or digital checking up on what's going on. And look, that was fine for a while, but I found that I started to have a lot of insomnia. I would wake up at maybe normally you might wake up for about 10 minutes at night, roll over and go back to sleep. But those 10 minutes that I woke up, I found that I was thinking, I wonder if I answered that email. Did I answer that email? Now, if I didn't have my phone next to the bed, I would just roll over and think, go back to sleep, worry about it tomorrow. But because my phone's there, I can grab it and check straight away. So one of the things that made all of this so much worse is that I don't have a clock radio. So my phone is my clock. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and I don't know what time it is, I'll automatically grab my phone to check the clock. Therefore, also being tempted to check my email. So all of these things just work together to make it almost impossible to go through a whole night without checking an email. So that's a very, very toxic thing. That's not very healthy at all. So what I tried to do is just give this up for a month. So what I did is I made sure, and my partner did the same, we made sure that we had no phones in the bedroom from about 7 o'clock onwards, and there was a ban on that, and we just put a digital clock across the other side of the room. We could see it. That was fine. And at first it was so stressful. I just worried all the time, I'm missing something, someone's emailing me. Was that a text message that I heard? I thought I heard them when they weren't there. They were like phantom text messages. And so in that time period of, say, the first maybe 3 or 4 days of giving up and digital detoxing, I felt more anxious. But then when I got used to that, I felt so much more calm. And I realized the ridiculousness of having to think that I'm on call all the time when I can just leave all of that in another room. And I found, interestingly, that I had some improvements in my health. So I had a tendency to suffer from mini migraines, just like small little bursts of migraine I can feel coming, so I can just address them straight away over the day. You might take a chewable aspirin or bizarrely enough drink some coffee. But I found that those sorts of things decreased when I stopped, when I went into digital detox, when I stopped engaging in digital culture 24 hours a day or over the night. So clearly I was getting more sleep. I wasn't worrying as much. I found that my posture improved. My shoulders didn't hurt as much because I wasn't constantly hunched over my phone as well. And having very bad eyesight, I found that it was actually much better because I was getting less normal sort of headaches as well. So for me, the health benefits were just after about 4 days were immediate. I just had to go through that slightly anxious stage of giving it up, which is quite literally the first stage of a detox, I think, when you're just trying to work through the giving up feelings of a detox process. So from my perspective, it was a really positive thing. I slip back sometimes, I think I need to go to group therapy for it occasionally, but for the most part, I think it's much better. And now if I wake up in the middle of the night, I make a conscious decision after maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Do I feel I have insomnia? If I do, I will go into another room and I will turn my laptop on. So I won't automatically reach for a phone. So I'm demarcating the time and the device that I'm using and the time time that I'm using it for, and at what time I'm reaching for it. So I feel like I'm in control a lot more. And that, of course, is a great way to reduce anxiety. So that was really interesting. And I'd recommend that to people to try. I think maybe we should have a national detox day. We might already have one, I'm not sure. If not, we should have one where everyone just goes through as much as possible after work hours, of course, in letting that sort of social engagement with our phones and our constant work engagement with our phones after hours, letting that go. What's also interesting, I think, from an academic perspective, is thinking about the way our communication styles have changed as a result of engaging in so much digital interchange, and particularly so much social media interaction. I find, for example, students tend to be so used to using SMS language and chat room language that they've forgotten how to write a formal email, or forgotten how to write an email in a professional context. So you tend to get emails from students that you may have only seen you lecturing, so they don't know you, saying, hey, how you going, LOL, ha ha ha, I'm coming to class, catch you L8R. And clearly my use of SMS is a bit dated, but gives you an idea of the sort of informality that they will often use when communicating with me. And other colleagues have said the same thing. And I even had one colleague that stood up in a meeting with students, an orientation introduction meeting when they first met, a lecture full of students, and said, you need to think of me as your employer. Don't send me short text messages that in email. Don't send these sort of truncated online language use. Don't send me emoticons in email. And when I heard that, I thought, gosh, that's a bit of a harsh thing to say to a student. But then I actually looked back and saw all the various emails of this nature I got, and realized it is a bit epidemic that students don't really understand this difference between when to communicate formally and professionally, and when to communicate to a friend, and how to use that language, and how that language is different. So that was really interesting for me. And so I think that digital detox reminds people that it is not the only way to communicate, and that when you step back from using these devices and using this method of communication so frequently across the day, you actually have to think about the purpose of the communication. You're not just thinking, I have to communicate with someone, grab it, do it now. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to go into work, or into my student study space. I'm going to send my lecturer an email, because you're doing that in the work hours. So in your head, it's framed as a work or scholarly activity, or a university engagement activity. Whereas if you're sending it from home, you're in your domestic environment, you're in your relaxed space. You might be kicking back with friends, having a drink if you're a student, and forget that you need to engage in this formality. So I think that it has quite broad implications. And other things I think that are useful about digital detox is just remembering to spend time with people in a way that makes them feel important, rather than in a way that makes them feel like they're secondary to your phone. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone else. And an example I can give you from my own life about this is when my sister and myself go over to visit my mother. And we're at the dinner table, and of course my sister and I are constantly looking at our phones. Our phones are next to us on the dinner table. My mother, who is in her 70s, has no understanding that in our reasonably young person's world is considered to be appropriate. So what she sees when she sees us doing that is just rudeness. So being able to even digitally detox for a couple of hours when you're with your family, or when you're with your loved ones, can make an enormous influence and can improve your relationships, and it's a sign of respect.